Hello, I'm Beaver Trapper in Birmingham, and in this segment of the show, I'm hopefully going to share with you lessons that I've learned in the School of Hard Knocks. Hello and welcome to another edition of the School of Hard Knocks. Tonight we're going to talk about getting started in prepping, and this is part 2 of a 3-part series. In the previous episode, we talked about surviving the power outage, basically getting by for one night when the power is out. Now we're going to talk about the next stage of prepping, and that is prepping for a little bit longer event, say a hurricane or tornado, an ice storm, or what have you. Basically, we're talking about an event that may last 2-3 days, up to a week, maybe 10 days, depending upon the situation. This is especially timely because less than 48 hours ago, tornadoes ripped through Birmingham, Alabama. There were people who were prepped and prepared, and that are glad they were. There were people who weren't prepped and are wishing that they were. And there are people who are dead tonight because preps weren't made. And those are the cold hard facts. So the first thing I'm going to mention is that if you didn't listen to the previous episode, go back and listen to it, because what I'm going to talk about tonight builds on that foundation. One of the first things that you're going to figure out in a longer term event is that your core infrastructures are going to be destroyed or disrupted. One of the most critical of our core infrastructures is water. You've got to have water to live, and you've got to have water to have good sanitation. Both of those are important. One of the first things that you've got to figure out is how you're going to get fresh water to drink if you go to the sink, turn on the faucet, and nothing comes out, or if what comes out is dirty. I would recommend that everyone who can possibly afford it get a big Berkey water filter. It's what I use. I've used one for years, and in my opinion, they're the absolute best water filters you can buy. It's a piece of equipment that you can stake your life on. In addition to having water to drink, you're going to need water for sanitation purposes. You're going to need to be able to flush the toilets. You need to figure out where you're going to get your water from, or if you're going to have to store your water. And if so, how are you going to store the water, and how much are you going to need? I'm fortunate in that I have a spring on my property that never runs dry, even in the deepest drought. It never runs dry. So I'm very fortunate in that respect. A lot of people are not so fortunate. So you need to think about this. When it comes to storing water, if you have to resort to storing it in containers, one of the best containers that I've found is one of the blue square aquatainers. You can get them at Academy Sports, sometimes at Walmart, but those are very good containers. They're stackable, they're square, and they don't leak. So they're pretty cheap as well. One of the next pieces of core infrastructure that's going to be missing is, of course, your electricity. Electricity is something that most Americans take for granted, and once it's gone, it's kind of a shock. And you can get along without it for a night, maybe two, but when you start getting into 10 days without it, you're going to have to make some arrangements. And I strongly suggest that everybody invest in a generator. Now, generators are a big topic. They're going to be their own episode, so I'm not going to get too deep into generators here, but I'll reinforce the fact that I use a Honda EU series generator. It's very quiet, very fuel efficient, and it fits my needs. So if you can at all possibly afford it, get a generator. It's going to make your life so much easier. Another aspect that has to be addressed is how are you going to heat or cool your home? The sad fact of the matter is the modern American home is uninhabitable without electricity and core infrastructure. Whether you live in the north in the wintertime or whether you live in the south in the summertime, it really can be difficult to live in a modern prefab home without these core infrastructures. One of the best techniques that I can recommend is to not worry about heating or cooling the entire house. What you need to do is you need to narrow it down to a room or a space that's going to be your primary living area, and that's what you've got to focus on heating or cooling. And if you don't have a ready-made space like that, you can make one by hanging shower curtains up to wall open areas off, or tarps, or taping up drop cloths, or what have you. But this is a way to take a large open area and basically narrow it down to a much smaller area that you can actually heat or cool efficiently. So it's going to be important to have a comfortable space where you can actually live. Another thing to consider is that most of the time the road grids are going to be either impaired or impassable. If you have trees down, if there's flooding or anything of that nature, power lines down, it can be difficult to travel. This means you need to be prepared to have a good first aid kit, and I mean a good one. I'm not talking about something that you go to Walmart and buy, or something that you just order off a site on the internet that's got some band-aids and stuff. I'm talking about serious burn supplies. Do you have water gel? Water gel is one of the best burn products that you can have, and trust me, a burn is painful. You need bandages. You need good bandages. In a situation like this, if you're cleaning up after a hurricane or a tornado, you're going to be running chainsaws, you're going to be around debris, there's going to be broken boards, nails, bare metal. It's a hazardous environment to try and clean up, and your chances of being injured are high. And if you can't get somewhere in an emergency, you need to be able to take care of yourself or take care of your family if they were to be injured. Another thing that you've got to think about is prescription medications. There are a lot of people in this country that will die without their medicine. It's just that simple. There are a lot of people in this country who need machines in order to breathe or in order to get their medical treatment. I once ran a volunteer shelter after a snowstorm, and I was absolutely shocked at how many people were brought in that if they did not have access to electricity, they were going to die. So you need to think about these things. You need to stock up on your prescriptions. You need to have a good supply of that. The next thing I want to talk about is preparing food. When it comes to preparing food over a 10-day period or so, this is where you're going to need to break out your basic camping supplies. A propane stove is a good thing to have. Any type of camping stove like that. When I've gone through hurricanes, in order to minimize the heat that was generated inside the house, we try to do all of our cooking outdoors, including cooking on the barbecue grills, cooking on smokers, that sort of thing. And I would strongly urge people to learn how to use a Dutch oven. If you've got a little fire ring or a little fireplace out somewhere that you can build a fire and you have a supply of firewood, there's not much that you can't cook without a Dutch oven, and they're very fuel efficient. It doesn't take much wood to get one up to temperature and keep it there for an hour or two, and you can cook pretty much anything. When it comes to your downtime in one of these situations, you'd be surprised how people are addicted to the internet these days. People are addicted to their iPhones, their iPods, their iPads, you name it, their games. When all of a sudden that's taken away, people are at a loss for what to do or how to spend their time, and it's like families actually have to communicate again, and it can be uncomfortable if you're not used to that. It sounds crazy, but it's the truth. And so you need to plan for a way to have some entertainment to keep people occupied so they don't dwell on the situation that they're stuck in, that they don't have any power, they don't have any lights, that they're cold or they're hot or they're thirsty or what have you. And one of the best ways to do this is you need to start thinking about standardizing all of your batteries. One of the things that I insist on is, much as possible, everything that I buy runs off AA's. I don't want to have a headlamp that runs off AAA's and a flashlight that runs off AA's and a lantern that runs off D's. It complicates your supply chain, it complicates your inventory and keeping things stored up, to where if you've got everything that will run off AA's, that's all you have to store. And if you're going to go to rechargeable batteries, you only have to have one size batteries and one size recharger. You're not constantly switching out sizes or don't have what you need at the time. You need to think about communications, not only after the event, but before the event. In last April's tornadoes that came through Alabama, a lot of people were killed, and one of the things that happened was when the tornadoes came through, that morning we had high straight line winds that knocked down power lines and knocked down the tornado sirens that were mounted on the power lines. So we didn't actually have a tornado that morning, but the infrastructure was taken out. Later that night, the tornadoes came through, and none of the traditional warning methods were in operation. The sirens were down, nobody had power, nobody had TV, only a few people had the battery-operated radios and were actually monitoring things. And so hundreds of people were killed because the typical and traditional warning methods weren't working. So you need to think about a situation like that. You may not always have warning because the warning systems may have been taken out earlier. So think about that. Another thing that people don't realize is that if you have pets, you're going to have to provide for your pets somehow. Do you have any food stored for them? I mean, think about it. How many times do you go out to feed your dog and you realize, oh, I'm almost out of dog food? Well, what if something came in right at that moment, a tornado came in and took everything down and you couldn't get resupply? What are you going to do for your dog for the next 10 days? You know, in my family, a dog is a member of the family, and that's something that I prepare for. One of the last things I want to touch on is your car. A lot of people don't understand that your car is basically a generator that sits loaded with fuel all the time. I have a neighbor that has a golf cart. It has 4 deep cycle batteries in it. They have no idea how useful something like that could be. That's a rolling generator. If they would buy some solar panels, they could recharge those deep cycle batteries and use that as a generator. It's a ready-made generator. The last time we had a power outage here, it never even crossed their mind to use that. So you have to start thinking about that. You can go out and buy a quality Xantrex inverter, hook it up to your car, have your car idling, and use that to generate power. You can buy a variety of 12-volt adapters to recharge your cell phone, recharge your iPhone, whatever, off of a 12-volt battery. So you need to factor that in. I hope this has been of value to you, and I hope you take it to heart, because right now, as I'm speaking, there are hundreds and hundreds of people in my city that don't have a place to live, whose homes were destroyed. They don't have clothes. The tornado came through at 3:30 in the morning and literally blew them out of their house onto the ground in a driving rain. That happened. So anyway, I hope this has been of value to you, and next time we'll talk about surviving the long-term event. Good night.